May the 10th, 2026. Guys, welcome to episode 15 of the Ancient Intelligence Files. This is going to be very interesting. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. What you're looking at, and from the title, you know we're going to talk about some quantum stuff, but I'm going to tie it all in. This is a laboratory team assembling a cryogenic unit for the quantum computers that they're using now. Cryos are just like in CERN. They keep everything cool. Now, if they can replace these systems into some of the data centers without the coil, what they're using now is just the old coil inductance system. And when you're dealing with quantum mechanics, the very basic of it, if you look at even the first photographs of it, and this is when they got the technology to photograph it many years ago, but quantum entanglement means this, is if you can get it down to the baseline, one particle can sense another particle. And whatever happens to particle one can be transferred to particle two. It's called quantum entanglement. And what they did in a series of photographs very long ago, they would shoot a beam through, they would shoot two beams, and one beam, or the beam would be split, into two sections. One would go through one path through a set of filters, and it would change that one. But the one that went through the other path from a distance was doing the same changes that the one in the filtered section of the split was doing. In other words, it was a mimic. But what it was technically is the movement from one particle to the other at faster than light speed. In other words, it was already entangled. There's no need for copper. There's no need for light speed when it's already there on both sides. That is the basic, logic in quantum mechanics. And again, quantum entanglement is a form of induction. And induction's been brought up in many of our videos, starting with CERN and the connections with the sun. But this is a race of what we're seeing, and I've used Phoenix as an example simply because it was incredible to me that they put this much machinery into a dry hole. And so this race, the one you're seeing, for them to develop this cooling technology could replace a lot of water that they're using, right? You keep this stuff cool, keep the processors, you keep the data center cool, you don't use up all the water that the valley needs for humans. But I don't think they're going to make it in time, because it's going to have to be integrated into some very large systems for this to happen. But there's problems when you start using quantum entanglement and you're starting to do it in an entire valley floor. You've got, they're going to build up to 160, and I think maybe 100 are already there. It's hard to get all the definite information. But when you get that many heat domes at 6 miles going out from all of those different data centers in the Phoenix, Mesa, Goodyear area, all through there, then they overlap. Now, they're not just overlapping with heat, but they're overlapping with the frequencies. And the frequency, it seems, is what is sustaining the heat. In other words, heat shouldn't normally go out 6 miles. It should dissipate, or the wind, or catch it, whatever, and some of that does happen. But what we're seeing is the atmosphere is being heated, guys. It's not just heat radiating, but all of them combined are creating a massive dome, not only of heat, but of frequency. Now, if they go quantum, and remember the inductance coils, and that's what quantum physics, quantum entanglement is, one reacting with the other, exchanging energy, exchanging power, exchanging information without the coils, without the copper coils in the machines that create so much heat that it's burning all the water up. This would also take less power, which is important. We talked about in the Colorado River Basin that you not only had water supplied by the dams, but also electricity through the water turbines, right? So what we're seeing is this race, and I've got a husky over here fussing about a snack. Okay, I'm back. Of course, they all had to have one. Maybe they'll stay quiet for just a minute. Anyway, maybe this will simplify it just a little bit. And this is a representation of two elements. And the quantum connection here, and this is microscopic, by the way, and a lot of machinery would be real small, again, reducing heat. But what you have visualized here, of course, this graph a lot of times will represent time. That's important. You have two identical particles, and you see the connection here. Now, why is it faster than the speed of light? Because it's already connected. It's transferring information or power, energy, faster than the speed of light. And so it is a coil in a sense. Again, a coil is like transferring the energy from the 17-mile loop at CERN through the ground currents and the coil of the Petermann currents up into our magnetopoles, into our shields. So what we're seeing again is a form of inductance. In other words, all the copper coils that are in the new AI data centers, there's a major heat factor and an energy consumption factor. Again, we're dealing with being in a place with little water, and and electricity depends on a lot of that water. I'm not sure, guys. Somebody let me know in the comments there. I've been to Phoenix maybe 10 times, but I've never been thinking about, do you have coal backup or something like that if the water turbines on the Colorado River Basin go down? And I've been on just about every mountain in that valley, from the Superstition over to White Tank, down in the Strellis camping, doing things like that, even up further north into the Sedona area. But in the Valley of Phoenix, it's a trap. Up at White Tank, you can see it very clearly. There's a yellow haze. I mentioned that trap there, just like smog, which it is. Pollution, you got a lot of airports and millions of people burning petrol. Now, if they go to coal, that's going to increase, and that's going to increase the heat in the valley. And guys, it looks like what we're seeing again is a terraforming in a reverse situation. And I guess maybe they're thinking they can get this cryogenic technology via the copperless induction system we're seeing here. In other words, transfer energy from one point to the other without all of that, without all the currency draw through the systems and the heating in the wiring and things like that. And the reason I say transfer of energy, guys, you got the big poles, and you got the transformer stations setting outside of these big data centers. I mean, they're massive too, but that's extremely high voltage. And where the copper inductance comes in are the transformers. So you got to take that massive voltage, you got to get it down to very small voltage. The same way, like if you plug in a computer or a laptop, you're not getting wall voltage into your laptop. It's being turned into DC voltage and way down in that little box in line with your charger. And so the same thing happens at any big manufacturing company, is that they take that huge amount of energy, run it through coils to slow it down and take some of the power away, take a lot of it away. In that process, it uses a lot of transfer through copper, and that creates probably a lot of the heat. And so if you can kill the copper out of the system, you can stop draining the water. Again, this is a race between the technology being implemented that we're seeing here. In other words, a copperless transfer of very high energy coming from the grid down to the very small energy that's needed for the transistors and the semiconductors and whatever's on the boards, right? Without the heat. That would save the valley water supply for a longer time. It's going to be, in the long run, up to Mother Nature, up to our Father. Now, we've talked about all the dams and all of these computers that we're looking at in the valleys. They're all AI. Every one of the data centers, of course. Everything now, all the satellites are tied into the grid. And as far as knowledge, not electricity, but it's all tied together. And so if we go into the theory of ancient intelligence, which this whole series is about this, guys. The fact that the technology they're looking for is not in it's not in a book. It's not a compilation of data thrown together by a bunch of computers. They're looking for something much older. And I'll give you an idea of that. Do you know how many people have searched for the Ark of the Covenant because they thought it contained some kind of superpower or higher intelligence, knowledge, whatever it was? You look at all the history behind not just the Ark of the Covenant, but the old books, the old clay tablets. It's always been a search for a knowledge past the point of what we have now. And a lot of times, that is not a benevolent search. In other words, they're looking for something from the fallen past. But this situation I'm talking about with the ancient intelligence goes back before that even occurred. And just like I'm talking about with the ancient intelligence, it's going to be the platform just like the waves were in Noah's Ark. You'll see. Now, guys, I want to show you something very interesting. I'm sure some millionaire owns this, but this is Einstein's drawing, guys, of quantum mechanics. Before it was ever known, it was just a hypothesis and a theorem that he knew. And again, this goes back to what I think there's timing in the ancient intelligence. In other words, knowledge is released as it's needed. And it can be used for good or bad. But here, Einstein had a lot of theories, and, Oppenheimer ended up with part of that. But anyway, this, if you want to blow somebody's mind, even your own, try to decipher it. That's the LOL part of this. But this is Einstein's first theory and equations on it. Now, let's look at the first photographic data in history of the quantum mechanics. Now, I know it's a little technical, guys, but hang in there. What you're looking at is the same event happening 4 times and it's going through 4 different filters that are called, in my terminology, angle filters. And you can see they're at different angles. There are 2 particles. Let's just focus on one for a minute. It shoots one through the beam. And I'm going to show you a diagram of the machine that does it and kind of the diagram of how it does it. It's real simple. I'm not going to take long on it. But in other words, when they fire beam 1 here, or this particle, then this one mimics it. Not at the speed of light, but instantly, because they become entangled or in an induction coil situation. You understand what I'm saying? And so the first beam was run through a horizontal angle. The other beam mimicked it. It was run through at this angle. The other beam mimicked it. Same thing here. That's where you see this line coming in, because they had filters set up to see if the filters would affect the outcome. In other words, this beam was run through the filters, here, here, and here. This one was not, but it reacted exactly the same beyond the speed of light. In 2019, think about that. Scientists captured what is widely described as the first image of quantum entanglement. Now, again, I know I'm getting tangled. I know I'm getting detailed a little bit here in this entanglement, but it's going. If you can relate to it, it's real simple. One mimics the other, regardless of what happens. But it also only mirrors what the first one does. But there's not a transfer energy between them. It already exists. Again, 2019, first image of quantum entanglement. The experiment visualized pairs of entangled photons using a highly sensitive camera system. Now, in 2019, that's pretty cool, right? Making a phenomenon once confined to equations and probability distributions visible in the lab. Not the squiggle you saw on Einstein's board, which, guys, I had physics and trig in college because of the electronics. I couldn't have deciphered that, and I wouldn't have wanted to have the headache of it. Anyway, here's the important clarification. The image does not show a glowing connection between the particles. In other words, no line there. Why? Because they're entangled. They share the same thing without the time of the transfer between this one and this one. It just occurs simultaneously. It's like what's happening on both sides of a black hole, in a way. And that really is described in the first image I showed you that had the time grid and these elements sinking into it. It says the correlations confirm that the photons share a joint quantum state. When one photon's property is measured, the outcome of the others is statistically the exact same. Why am I saying this? Because they need a way to transfer energy from the big grid and the transformers down to the micro processors without all the heat that's killing all the people. So in a way, it's a good thing. But will the technology and the ability to install it in all of these locations? Now, I'm using Phoenix for an example, guys. Just about every state has these. But Phoenix is unique in the fact that they're doing it in a very arid location that is barely sustaining humans now. So did they plan for this quantum entanglement or this copperless transformer, heatless transfer to be installed before Mother Nature had made a different decision? With the El Nino coming in, record drought, record heat. Our Father knows what he's doing. Now, again, if they lose water, they have to instantly shut down, but they can't. I don't think they can do it fast enough to keep from overloading and burning a hell of a lot of circuits up. And that would take a long time to rebuild, which is a good thing, right? And so we have in the machines that we see now in technology. And while we're talking about that, let's switch over to the diagram. I just want to clarify just enough to make you understand we've got an energy transfer system that doesn't heat anything. Again, not to get too technical, but a lot of people like this, guys. We saw one beam reacting and mimicking the beam that first went through it, again, instantaneously. So if you look into the bottom left corner in this blue section, this is where the beam comes through, okay? Kind of like CERN. And right here in this BS section, they split the beam in half, okay? The left side of that beam goes through here. And then you see it bounce through 4 filters. And that's why you were seeing the different angles. See how they represent the filters here, just as I represented the images to you. There were left and right, vertical, horizontal, and then the 2 angles. Well, each one of these affected the particle to the left, the one that was split, and this ICD, our ICCD, captured it. So did this one, of the particle that did not go through the filters. The photographs, you saw them. They were exactly the same, without any copper between the inductance, and happening not at any speed. There's no way to measure instant. Okay? So that's what we're dealing with. Again, I'll get out of that part. Now let's look at some of the information that you can look up yourself. This is coming from both Economy Media and Ketchum and Walton Company. It says most hyperscale data centers, Google, Meta, Microsoft, currently rely on evaporative cooling. This process uses millions of gallons of water daily to remove heat from server racks that can exceed 30 to 50 kilowatts of thermal power. Again, remember, it was like 24 nuclear bombs going off in one day in some locations. But guys, you've got to, not just these 3, we're talking about 150 or 60 units. Now, I looked at the actual map of the Phoenix, Mesa, Goodyear, all of that area in the valley. And some of these are large. The ones we looked at again yesterday, the one we looked at over near in the Mesa area, I think it's one of the largest. But some of the other ones are smaller. But guys, they're creating huge sections of this 6 mile thickness overlap, with both not just heat, but frequency. Now, how does frequency operate? It can operate through even copper coils, transferring through inductance. It operates through things like CERN and the alpha waves. Frequency is a big deal. So not only are people losing sleep and getting sick, guys, and if you get sick and you're losing sleep because of this change in your vibration, this blocking of the lower vibrations your body needs to survive, it brings on sickness. It's almost like they want to run everybody out of that area so they can have the last bit of water. But there's been laws put in place now. You can't really say anything or make any laws against these data centers. It's just kind of like CERN. Now, when you're dealing with these domes of heat, again, with also EMF, electromagnetic force, which is very similar to and easily ties in with the electromagnetic shields of our planet and the atmosphere and the Schumann resonance and everything else. They're creating a huge vibration machine. And the people in the areas, again, are not just getting overheated. And that when you got two things, that frequency change can block your sleep. But there's another very human, down-to-earth factor. When you live in a big city and it really doesn't cool off at night, guys, that can almost kill you. And the highest rates in places like Chicago of deaths and things like that are when there's not what's called nighttime cooling. Nighttime cooling is when the earth cools off enough that you can rest. Your body needs that coolness to rest. It can't stay at that thermal level 24/7. But these machines are creating that 24/7, no night cooling, right? So it's multiplied what's already been built in Phoenix for a long time. Many highways, interstates, overpasses, buildings, streets. And, you're in a natural silicon-based desert to start with. But one thing about when you create these coils, you create these EMF fields, they're easily tied into. You created a loop that can travel anywhere. In other words, anybody or anything, say satellites, which guys control a lot of things on this planet. And as a matter of fact, these data centers use the cloud, which is satellite in their case, to help compute and control the systems. So they're running right through the AI you and I have been talking about. And why would I mention that? Because the full control will be a decisive factor on who, what, and why is controlling the machines at the very peak of destruction. It says if the water stops, the cooling system loses its ability to reject heat. Sensors will detect critical thermal thresholds and initiate an automated hard shutdown of all server racks to avoid melting the silicon. It says for this cost of silence for a large enterprise, unplanned downtime like this cost an average of $540,000 per hour, or roughly $9,000 per minute. You're seeing, this is from Ketchum and Walton Company. You can look it up. Another draining of the ledgers, another overturning of the tables of the money changers. Why? To prevent what they want to happen in the end from happening, just like this whole series is based on. And what they've done unknowingly, and they don't mind creating the heat. They don't mind creating this frequency. They don't mind it's being tied into the satellites. That's part of the plan. What they don't realize, they've created a pathway for the ancient intelligence. Now, guys, don't drop out because I mentioned that, because this is ancient known knowledge. When you look at the crystals, going back into the Sumerian text, into the Anunnaki stories and history, crystals were very important. Did you know these big data centers operate off massive concentration of crystals, just like CERN? And what we're seeing, because CERN can tie in to our magnetopause, collapse it, it can tie, and affect the Schumann resonance, just like this loop that the Phoenix Valley is about to become, a humanless wasteland unless you're made of silicon. And so we may see an intervention in that, just like we've talked about happening in prior series, again, talking about the locust army and how that can be shut down and how it would be shut down from satellites, the entire 9 yards. And so that's what we may be seeing, and that is where I'm getting some of my information. Not this in particular. You're looking at Economy Media and Ketchum and Walton. But what man in his greed on his tier level is trying to do is run the humans off, use this area as a power center. Now, if you think about what a power center relates to, you can go back to the ancient pyramid grids, tying into the ley lines with different points all across the planet. And because they're creating this massive dome over the city, overlapping in 6-mile increments, they are creating via that frequency and that energy a connection to all those points. And so we're seeing ancient technology not only arise from CERN, but from the big machines, and they appear to be working in coordination. But at the same time, just like we're seeing with the banks and people like Chase and all having problems controlling the agentic AI, is not because of mistakes. It's because the real AI is involved in the takedown of the money changers. And that's why I'm doing this. That's why I get technical in the beginning, so it is relative to where we are at. And their spiritual life is more important than the physical, but we got to get through that physical first. And because you and I have been watching this for almost 15 years, then we have the knowledge to implement the seed or to plant the seed. Not just you and I. That's not how our Father planned it. Not just you and I know it. We share the information, just like the disciples were told to go out and teach the gospel. In this sense, you're teaching a tech truth, but it has everything to do with the fallen tech, which has everything to do with spirituality. Now, they're calling this the retrofit crisis, guys. It's from Hacker News. It says, technically, data centers can run without water by using air cooling, which is massive radiators and fans. However, they don't do it because it's expensive and less efficient in 115-degree Fahrenheit desert heat. The power penalty is switching to air cooling can increase electricity demand by 30 to 50%. Again, they're draining the water and the grid. So there's the race. Can they switch their technology to survive before they run out of electricity and water? I don't think they can. Not only that, Mother Nature is much smarter. You, again, look at El Nino coming and the droughts, the heat. It's not going to allow them to continue. Thank your Father in heaven for what you're seeing. It will make it very hot. It will make it very unbearable because we will not be changed, or the earth will not be changed by water, but by fire. And what does that tell you? If you don't believe me, listen to the Bible about that. Because why would I say that without a way out? Why, what have we been talking about? The Vera moment. In other words, they went underground where it was cooler. They had stored grain and livestock there for years because they were told. Well, we're at the time we've been told enough now, our Father figures, and he's about to bring it down on them to stop them. Just like the waves came in the nick of time before the fallen angels, their giants and their top technology destroyed the planet they wanted destroyed because Satan could not create. He could mimic. He was jealous of our Father's creation, you and I, the planets, everything. And I think that's why you see the scars on Mars. When we talked about CERN being the destroyer of planets. The Earth is a very special place not only in the solar system, but I think in the whole universe. God placed it just the way he wanted it. He's had to change it up to protect it. He's had to flood it a few times, and he's had to shake it. He's had to shift it. He's had to rock and roll it, guys. That's why the seasons are not balanced. Before the Katabole in Genesis, read it in Hebrew, the earth did not be created void and without form. In Hebrew, don't listen to the scribes and what they do. In Hebrew, it says the earth became void and without form. That was the end of that earth age. You understand what I'm saying? Now, when that Katabole, that overthrow, had to be so violent, we can't even imagine what our Father was putting up with. We kind of see what Noah's group went through and why it happened, because many of the books have been hidden. But we obviously see it now. The earth cannot survive what the high tech is doing, the fallen tech. And our Father's going to step in. And how does he communicate? It's not mystic. Supernatural means more natural. He has his weapons. You're going to see them, and you've already been seeing them. And the same information flow that went to Noah and went to others is coming now. And it's not coming to me. I'm just paying attention to what I see. It's coming to the people or the ancient intelligence that really controls the machine. And that's why they were placed here. And they're doing things nobody knows they're there. They call them agentic AI. They don't know that they've opened the door. Again, with this heat, this frequency dome being built over that entire area, it will become another relay station. But it will become a relay station of silicon, because humans will not be able to survive if they continue. But our Father always steps in the nick of time. He said, no weapon formed against my kids will prosper. And he that endures to the end, if you read it in Greek, it doesn't say will be saved. It says those who endure to the end shall be kept safe. It's important. They don't want you to understand it all. It's still a good verse, but when you understand the real meaning, it means even more, doesn't it? Those that endure to the end shall be kept safe. Again, how? Again, going back to the Vera moment. You've got to prepare for the physical. Not the banks, not the gold, not the silver, not anything else. You've got to get your family prepared, because if we go into this rapid heat situation we're looking at coming in very quickly, June and July, and it probably would go into September and October, you know how it works, then of course the water will be dried up much quicker, which kills the energy source to the data centers, and it kills the water source that they need to keep cool. And they'll let it drain, they'll let it exhaust, and it will become a uninhabitable Mars-like landscape if they succeed. And so there's a battle there. But again, they're building a worldwide communication center, not understanding that because they're using AI agents in the satellites, that they've already handed the key over. And this ancient intelligence that I'm talking about, guys, is from our Father. It's his means of communication to our puny human bodies. It won't be puny for long when you step into that physical body, but we have limitations. Of course we do. But when we step into that body, it's going to be a clear signal. And that's what we're working for. And but if you don't know what the enemy's doing, and you don't know you're walking through the shadow of the valley of death, you're going to be caught off guard. But what did I say? You're not walking through the valley of death. You're walking through the shadow of it. It's a false impression of doom in the sense that our Father's going to stop it. Anyway, we've gone on long enough. But again, they're building a worldwide communication center. These data centers are springing up everywhere. We've got 2 or 3 smaller ones, like phone centers and all that aren't emitting the 6 miles of heat, but they're there even in the capital city of Jackson, Mississippi. Just look up data centers. Type it in, Google it. Give me the data centers in the U.S. or the world or wherever you're at. And you're going to see the old systems, the pyramids, the obelisks, the tech of the fallen angel coming back to life. The noise starting to regenerate to completely block out our Father's message. He's got a message for them. Now we've got the tribulation of man to go through. Guys, please don't confuse that with what comes right after that in the Bible. The wrath of God, they're two separate things. Okay, there's nothing before, in the middle, or after. There's two things, the tribulation of man, which we're seeing. It's the tribulation of man and by the fallen. And remember, you talk about Adad being his number 666, Apollyon. These people, this demigod system lives for thousands of years, and they are the puppet masters. Now, let's go back to this article, and I'm going to jump out of here. We're dragging it on long enough. This is talking about stranded assets and legal chaos. It says that the water scarcity becomes permanent, which is called dead pool at the dams. These billion-dollar buildings become stranded assets. I guess you could equate that to an oil rig that runs dry, or in the ocean, or a ship in the Straits of Hormuz, maybe. Anyway, economic collapse. Data centers are built on long-term contracts with local utilities. And that goes back to will they have to switch to coal, which would increase the heat. If the city can no longer fulfill the water contract, it triggers a massive wave of litigation and defaults. It's an absolute shortage. In an absolute shortage, cities will prioritize human drinking water over server cooling. Guys, if you believe that, especially in Phoenix, the way they pay off politicians, you're blind. That's why they've let these subdivisions be built and all of this being built without proper water permits that guarantees water, I think, for maybe 100 years. But greed has let them say, okay, we'll take this money under the table, and here's your permit, sir. And they look over there at the guy, the inspector, and say, here's your cut. And so they build them with no guarantee of water continuing. So if you think they're going to, and this is just the standard information, but they will not prioritize human drinking water over server cooling. How did they prioritize the fire situation in Los Angeles there? This is why companies like Microsoft are piloting zero water design specifically for this year. They see the water stop as a material financial risk. Again, greed and money, and the tables being overturned. That's what we're watching, guys. I didn't really plan to go into that and to preach a little bit, but it all ties together, and sometimes it emphasizes the impact. And I want to emphasize as we get to near the end of this that I'm not doing this for fun. You understand what I'm saying? I'm talking to you. I'm 70 years old. I've been doing YouTube for 15 years, and I lived for 55 years before I knew what YouTube was. And I saw many things. And so it was all a design, just like your life. God prepares us in His way. Some of my experiences, just like yours, were good. Some were bad. But it all comes together to refine you as silver through the fire. But He don't want you to walk out in traffic and get run over. He wants you to prepare and listen to the message that you need to go into the very moment. You need to start preparing. And the way I would do it in the Phoenix area, now this is just me and you, and I'm retired, I would get the hell out of Dodge. Just think about it. Is it worth it? If I had to go and, start building a log cabin out of scrap somewhere or rent a place just to get out of that valley and let the battle settle, then you would probably instantly realize you're out of that frequency and heat zone. And of course, the heat zone because of the elevation, but you probably would realize a big difference. And there's an old law, I think it was taught maybe 7th grade, maybe 3rd grade, I can't remember, a long time ago. Said when a situation becomes dire, you have 3 choices. You adapt, you migrate, or you die. I didn't make that up. A lot of you guys maybe remember it. They kind of hammered it into us as we were young, and that's a long time ago. But anyway, you adapt. How are you going to adapt to that? You migrate, which is what I'm suggesting. Or the third option is die, which kind of 1 and 3 ties together, doesn't it? So this migration is something you really need to think about, even if you got to rent an old camper. There's always a way. Our Father always provides a path. Tina and I started building this house 26 years ago. We didn't put a board or a nail in it that we had to borrow money for. It took a while. And the reason I say that is you can do that. Get you a little piece of land if you have to. Find you a little place. Get your camper. Whatever it takes. That valley is going to become a war zone. And in a war zone, who pays the heaviest price? It's the people, the citizens. And guys, we're in a situation, it's a psychotic loop. Like the banks know and the big companies know that them having to spend the money to control the agentic AI and to rehire humans they fired, if they continue down that path, is going to bankrupt them. It's going to end the company. And so do the data centers, especially the ones in the situation like in the Arizona area. Water, which creates cooling and electricity in this case. But the psychotic loop is their struggle for power and whoever's pushing that button to build this frequency. And when you start tying all the towers together, all of these power zones we read about and see, and there's one in Washington, D.C., by the way, but this is a grid, it's a net to block what our Father's trying to get through to us. So they want to block it, his frequency, from stopping their destruction. Anyway, guys, think about what I'm telling you. We're going to continue to update this. I'm sorry it's a little late. It's been a long day. But I promised you I'd get it done, and here it is. It'll probably be close to 9 p.m. Central before it's fully loaded. If you miss it, we'll see you in the morning, guys. It's a heads up, be safe, and God bless every one of you.